Okay, so here's the twist. The reason cannabis feels helpful for ADHD is also the reason it can make your symptoms worse over time. For many people with ADHD, cannabis can feel like it solves a problem. It quiets racing thoughts, takes the edge off, and makes boring or overwhelming tasks feel doable. That's why it's common for people with ADHD to use cannabis as a way to self-medicate. It works in the short term. But while research on ADHD and cannabis is still limited, there's enough evidence to suggest that this short-term relief can come with trade-offs, including effects on attention, motivation, sleep, and long-term symptom management. So in this episode, I'll look at some of the reasons why ADHD brains are more likely to use cannabis, what the research actually says about cannabis and ADHD, and talk about healthier alternatives without relying on getting high. This is ADHD where we talk about everyday life and ADHD. I'm your host, Dr. J. I'm a licensed psychologist who works with those with ADHD. If you're getting high to get along with your ADHD symptoms, this episode is for you. So let's start by talking about why cannabis use is so common among people with ADHD. Studies show a frequent correlation between ADHD and cannabis use. So let's talk numbers for a second. Research shows that about 27% of people with ADHD will develop cannabis use disorder at some point in their lives, compared to roughly 9% of the general population. Among adults with ADHD, 75% reporting having used it at some point, and another 41% report using it in the past month. ADHDers may be more likely than neurotypicals to turn to cannabis since ADHD brains are more likely to seek stimulation and have poor impulse control. It can be a way to manage stress and the symptoms of ADHD or to self-medicate when ADHD is undiagnosed. So I want to be very clear that you're not alone if you use cannabis to alleviate symptoms of ADHD. Let's take a closer look at the relationship between ADHD and cannabis. The first thing I want to talk about is dopamine differences and the brain's reward system. ADHD is associated with lower baseline dopamine activity, particularly in brain regions involved in motivation, reward, and executive functioning. This can show up as chronic boredom, difficulty initiating tasks, emotional flatness or understimulation, and a constant search for novelty and intensity. Cannabis activates the brain's endocannabinoid system, which interacts with dopamine pathways and can temporarily increase dopamine release. For an ADHD brain, that relief can feel like things feeling more interesting, emotional intensity softens, or stress feels far more manageable. Over time, though, the brain can start to associate cannabis with its most reliable dopamine boost, making urges to resist using harder, especially when you're under stress or boredom. Next, I want to talk about self-medication when ADHD is undiagnosed or untreated. Many adults with ADHD, especially women and those from marginalized groups, are diagnosed later in life, after years of masking and being labeled as anxious, depressed, or lazy. Before diagnosis, cannabis may function as an unofficial coping strategy for emotional dysregulation, overthinking, sensory overload, or social anxiety. Next is insomnia and sleep dysregulation. Sleep problems are extremely common in ADHD, including difficulty falling asleep, racing thoughts at night, and also delayed sleep phase syndrome. Cannabis is frequently used as a sleep aid, especially strains higher in THC, which can shorten sleep onset for some users. However, research shows a mixed picture. Short-term, THC may help with sleep initiation, but long-term, regular use can disrupt REM sleep and worsen sleep quality over time. This can create a cycle where cannabis helps you fall asleep, but leaves you feeling less rested the next day. Now let's shift into hyperactivity, restlessness, and nervous system arousal. For people with hyperactive or combined type ADHD, cannabis can act as a downregulator. This can look like reduced physical restlessness, less internal agitation, or a slower pacing of thoughts. This calming effect can feel especially appealing on overstimulated days. The risk of that is that cannabis becomes the primary way that the nervous system downshifts instead of one option among many. Next, we're going to talk about distractibility and hyperfocus, or more so the illusion of hyperfocus. Some ADHDers report that cannabis helps them focus, or at least feel focused. What's often happening is a reduced awareness of distractions, a narrowed attentional field, or increased absorption in pleasurable tasks. While this can feel like hyperfocus, studies suggest that cannabis may actually impair working memory, processing speed, and sustained attention, particularly with frequent or high-dose use. So the focus may feel better, even if cognitive efficiency isn't. Now a word on impulsivity and habit formation. Impulsivity is a core ADHD feature, and it plays a major role in substance use patterns. Once the brain learns that cannabis equals dopamine and relief, it becomes harder to pause, evaluate, or delay use, especially during emotional distress. Now let's talk about low self-esteem, masking, and social reward. Many people with ADHD grow up receiving chronic negative feedback. You're too much. You're not trying enough. Why can't you just focus? Cannabis can temporarily soften self-criticism and increase feelings of social ease. The dopamine boost plus shared social experiences can feel validating, especially for people who are used to masking or people-pleasing to fit in. While cannabis may offer short-term symptom relief, long-term or heavy use is associated with worsening executive function, increased motivational difficulties, higher risk of cannabis use disorder, or potential exacerbation of anxiety or depression. While it might feel good in the short term, long-term cannabis use comes with risks to your well-being, and there's no strong evidence to support it as a treatment for ADHD symptoms. So let's look at some alternatives that are healthier than regular cannabis use. So let's start by talking about medication. Your ADHD medication is your first-line defense. Stimulant medications like methylphenidate or Ritalin or Concerta and amphetamines like Adderall or Vyvanse are really effective for ADHD symptoms. These medications work by increasing dopamine and norepinephrine availability in the brain, addressing the actual deficit rather than temporarily flooding your system with dopamine like cannabis does. Research consistently shows that people with ADHD who are on effective medication are less likely to develop substance use problems, not more. If stimulants don't work for you or they cause problematic side effects, there are non-stimulant options like Strattera, guanfacine, and bupropion or Wellbutrin. Finding the right medication and dose can take time and requires working with a knowledgeable prescriber, but it's worth the effort. And I know some of you are thinking, but I don't want to be on medication forever, or I heard that it changes your personality. Here's the thing, unmedicated ADHD changes your personality too, and usually not in ways that you like. Medication that works well doesn't make you a different person, it makes you more able to be yourself. The next thing I want to talk about is therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, specifically adapted for ADHD, can be incredibly effective. This isn't just talk therapy, it's learning concrete skills and strategies for managing executive dysfunction. CBT for ADHD focuses on things like breaking down overwhelming tasks into manageable steps because your brain struggles with things like task initiation, creating external structure and systems since your internal structure can be unreliable, challenging negative thought patterns that have developed over years of struggling, and also building organizational skills and time management strategies that actually work for your ADHD brain. Studies show that CBT combined with medication is more effective than either treatment alone. Now let's talk about exercise. Here's something that actually works and doesn't require a prescription. Physical activity. Regular aerobic exercise has been shown to increase dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin levels in the brain. It's like giving your brain a natural medication boost. This is why I have an ambivalent relationship with exercise. I don't like to do it, but I love all the outcomes, so I do it anyway. Research indicates that even a single bout of moderate exercise can improve attention and executive functioning for up to 2 hours afterwards. Regular exercise, at least 30 minutes on most days, can lead to sustained improvements in ADHD symptoms, better emotional regulation, and improved sleep quality. The trick is finding something that you'll do consistently. If you hate running, don't force yourself to run. Try dancing, hiking, rock climbing, martial arts, swimming, or whatever gets your heart rate up and doesn't feel like torture. The ADHD brain responds well to novelty and excitement, so switching up the activities can help you maintain motivation. The next thing to talk about is sleep hygiene. If you've been using cannabis as a sleep aid, you need to replace it with actual sleep hygiene practices. The first is to consistently sleep and wake at the same time. And yeah, even on weekends, I know that feels cruel. Create a wind down routine that signals to your brain that it's time for sleep. You also want to keep your bedroom cool, dark, and only for sleep. So no scrolling on TikTok at 2 a.m. And on that note, you may want to avoid screens about an hour before bedtime because the blue light can affect melatonin. The next thing I want to talk about is nutrition. While there is no ADHD diet, certain nutritional approaches can help. Protein-rich foods provide amino acids that are precursors to dopamine and norepinephrine. Omega-3 fatty acids found in fish, walnuts, or flax seeds have been shown to support brain function and may help with ADHD symptoms. You want to avoid the blood sugar roller coaster. Skipping meals or eating high-sugar foods can worsen attention and emotion regulation. Regular, balanced meals help to stabilize your energy and focus throughout the day. Also, if you've been using cannabis regularly, you might notice changes in your appetite when you stop. This is normal and temporary. Your appetite regulation will recalibrate. And lastly, I want to talk about mindfulness and meditation. I can hear your groans already. Meditate? I can't even sit still for 30 seconds. I get it, but here's the thing. Mindfulness practice for ADHD doesn't have to mean sitting in lotus position for an hour. Research shows that even brief mindfulness exercises of 5 to 10 minutes can improve attention and reduce impulsivity in people with ADHD. The key is finding approaches that work for your brain. Examples of this can be things like movement meditation, so walking meditations, yoga, or Tai Chi. Some people have more success with guided meditation, so following along with an app or a recording. I personally enjoy mindful moments, simply pausing to notice your breath for 30 seconds when you feel overwhelmed. And there's also body scans where you bring attention to different parts of your body. Here's what I need you to understand. Implementing these strategies is hard. It's especially hard when you're still using cannabis regularly because cannabis can reduce your motivation and your executive function, the very things that you need to make these changes. So you might need to start small. Really small. Like, I'm just going to focus on taking my medication consistently this week small. That is okay. Small, consistent changes add up. And if you're trying to quit or cut back on cannabis, be prepared for a few weeks of feeling worse before you feel better. Your brain needs time to recalibrate. The dopamine system needs time to recover. Sleep might be rough initially. You might feel more anxious or irritable temporarily. This is normal and it passes. By implementing strategies and obtaining necessary supports, you can break free from the impulse to self-medicate with cannabis and establish a healthier relationship with your ADHD symptoms. That's it for this episode of ADHD And. If you found this helpful, check out our episode on ADHD and self-medicating, where I explain how to break toxic habits and cope with your ADHD symptoms in ways that are healthy. Thanks so much for joining me, and make sure to subscribe for ADHD resources and support like this.